I just can't let go of her. That's what Carol Dodge said about her daughter, Angie, who was just 18 years old when she was found murdered inside her Idaho Falls apartment in 1996. The killer left behind his DNA, but justice? That would take nearly 23 years, one wrongful conviction, one misidentified filmmaker, and one cigarette butt thrown from a moving car. This is the story of how forensic genealogy unmasked a killer and gave one mother the truth she never stopped chasing. Angie Dodge had just graduated high school. She was bright, independent, and full of life. In June of 1996, she moved into her own apartment, a milestone for any teenager. Her future was wide open. But on the morning of June 13th, her coworker noticed she didn't show up for work at the local beauty supply store. She called, no answer. She drove to Angie's place. The door was unlocked. What she found inside was a scene so violent it would haunt the town of Idaho Falls and Angie's family for decades. Angie had been sexually assaulted, stabbed 14 times, and left partially clothed on the floor. The killer hadn't worn gloves. He'd left DNA behind, a full, pristine male profile. But the name, the face, the motive, all of that was missing. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. We shout out Cold Trail viewers every week. This episode breaks down the 23-year forensic journey that cleared the innocent, exposed the guilty, and showed the power and danger of genetic genealogy. Angie Ray Dodge was born on December 21, 1977, the youngest in her family. Her mom, Carol, called her the spark of the household. She had big dreams, maybe college, maybe business. At 18, she was just discovering her place in the world. In the summer of 1996, she took her first big step, moving into her own apartment on I Street in Idaho Falls. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. 3 weeks into her new chapter, Angie came by her mom's house. They sat together. She laid her head on Carol's shoulder and said, "It's so hard growing up." Carol told her daughter she loved her. That would be the last time they spoke. That night, Angie stayed home. She never made it to the next morning. When police entered the apartment, they found a horrific scene. There were no signs of forced entry, but there were signs of a struggle. Angie had been raped, then stabbed 14 times. The killer had left semen, which, even in 1996, was valuable forensic evidence. DNA was extracted quickly, but the CODIS database had no matches. Investigators interviewed dozens of local men. They began focusing on people Angie had known or who knew people she knew. That's when the name Chris Tapp came up. Tapp was 20 years old, soft-spoken, and had no criminal history. He had a connection to someone who had once dated Angie. His DNA didn't match. He denied everything. But police kept him in interrogation for more than 100 hours across 23 days. He was given 7 polygraph tests, told he was lying, told he'd never leave unless he told the story they believed. Eventually, Tapp broke. He confessed, claiming he held Angie down while a friend stabbed her. The friend he named didn't match the DNA. Neither did anyone else he later accused. Still, Chris Tapp was arrested, charged, and convicted. In 1998, he was sentenced to 30 years to life for a murder he didn't commit.
And the DNA profile? Still sitting in evidence, still unmatched.
While the legal system closed the book, Carol Dodge refused to. She watched the interrogations. She studied the crime scene. And something didn't add up. Chris Tapp said he held her down, but his DNA isn't there. How could that be? In 2007, Carol contacted Greg Hempikian, a forensic DNA expert, and together they began pushing for advanced testing. The DNA was reanalyzed. Confirmed, it belonged to one man, not multiple, not Chris Tapp. In 2014, authorities made a bold move. They searched the public Ancestry.com database using Y chromosome familial matching. It worked. Partially. They got a hit. 34 out of 35 alleles matched a man named Michael Usry Sr., a churchgoer who had submitted DNA years earlier for a genealogy project. Detectives looked into his family and narrowed in on his son, Michael Usry Jr., a filmmaker whose work featured fictional murder scenes. He'd once passed through Idaho. He made dark films. It was enough for suspicion. Detectives flew to New Orleans. They interrogated him, took his DNA. It didn't match. Usry was cleared, but shaken, and the case remained unsolved.
Then came Parabon Nanolabs and C.C. Moore. By 2018, autosomal DNA had changed the game. C.C. took the preserved sample, uploaded it to GED Match, and began building a family tree. Her tree pointed toward an obscure branch of the Usry family, one that had splintered off more than 100 years ago. From dozens of names, they narrowed it down to 6 possible men. Investigators began trailing them, collecting cigarette butts, soda cans, napkins, anything for DNA. One after another, they were ruled out, until they discovered an obituary with a missing link. A woman who had divorced from an Usry descendant and given birth to a son with a new last name, Brian Lee Drips. He had lived across the street from Angie Dodge in 1996. He had been interviewed days after the murder, but never swabbed. In 2019, detectives followed him. He tossed a cigarette out of his car, they collected it, and in the lab, it was an exact match.
When confronted, Drips confessed. He said he had been drunk and high. He claimed he only intended to rape, not kill. He said he acted alone. That single sentence changed everything. If Drips acted alone, then Chris Tapp was innocent, fully. Carol Dodge, the woman who had once looked Tapp in the eyes and called him a monster, now led the charge to clear his name. In 2021, Brian Drips pled guilty to first-degree murder and rape. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 20 years. And in July 2019, Chris Tapp was formally exonerated, the first in U.S. history, due to genealogical DNA. The system had failed him. Science and a grieving mother set him free. In 2022, Chris Tapp was awarded $11.4 million in a wrongful conviction settlement. He began rebuilding his life, married, got a job, and spoke publicly about justice reform. But in 2023, tragedy returned. Chris was killed in an altercation in Las Vegas. A former professional wrestler and political candidate was charged with his murder. Carol Dodge, who had already buried one child, mourned again. She now speaks not only for Angie, but for Chris. Her fight changed laws, solved a case, and exposed the danger of coerced confessions and the promise of forensic science. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below. We shout out our Cold Trail community each week. Subscribe for real, solved cold cases and the exact forensic tools that brought justice.